in place. Today, we're looking forward. We are focusing our eye, and not just that, we are trying to learn from each other. And so the first session that will begin today, it's all about navigating COVID-19. All right, we're taking a look at the insights for sustained revenue collection and service delivery. And what is key today is basically learning from each other. Where are we? Remember, at this forum, we have representation from 20 out of 37 tax administrations, and many of them in Africa. So today we're seeking to learn from each other. We want to see what strategies that various tax administrations on the continent are employing towards survival and, of course, recovery. Yesterday we heard from Dr. Kitui that both survival and recovery must happen together. We can't do one and then the next. Those are strategies that we must employ at the same time. And so today we're going to literally be learning from each other. What are people doing across the continent? In Uganda, in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria, in Kenya, and South Africa, amongst many other countries. So we're going to hear from various tax administrators across the continent. And then we will have a question and answer session where you'll be able to put your questions through to the panelists. Remember, once again, we're a hybrid event, so you will see some panelists here on stage and others who will be joining us virtually from across the continent. Then we'll have that, and then sadly, we will put it to a close. But we have lots to learn before we even get there. I'd like to now introduce the speaker and the chair of this session. Like we said, we're navigating COVID-19 and we're looking for insights to sustained revenue collection and service delivery. The chair of this session, who will make his opening remarks, is Mr. Logan Wart. He's the Executive Secretary of the African Tax Administration Forum. Now, this is a multilateral organization. It comprises heads of African revenue administrations, and this organization is based in South Africa, in Pretoria. Mr. Wart is the organization's chief executive officer and is responsible for its overall management, strategy, and operations. Does the South have solutions? He believes so, and is a big proponent of South-to-South cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause. Joining us via link from South Africa, Mr. Logan Wart from the African Tax Administration Forum. Please give him a round of applause.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak at the summit. And a special thank you to the Commissioner General Mburu. Congratulations on your election to the ATAF Council yesterday. And we look forward to some significant and wonderful contributions from Kenya, as we always have as a founder member of our organization. Discussing the navigation of COVID-19 and the insights for sustained revenue is very important at this stage of where we find ourselves in the global economy. This pandemic has taken the world by shock. Although Africa and African countries have not seen the same rate of infections as other parts of the world, it is evident that African economies will suffer quite significantly. Before the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, what did the economy of the continent look like? And it's important to look at this in that context. The OECD's economic outlook, looking at the global GDP, projects that global GDP in 2020 alone will fall by about 4.5%. The African economic outlook, produced by the African Development Bank, projects that economic prospects will be weak for real GDP in Africa. And this is projected to contract by at least 1.7% this year, dropping by 5.6 percentage points since January, at the start of all the lockdowns in March. With it continuing beyond the first half of 2020, there would be a deeper GDP contraction in 2020 of about 3.4%, and the growth projected of the outbreak of the virus cumulatively GDP losses could range between 171 billion to 236 billion in 2020 to 2021. In other words, with the projected contraction, Africa could suffer GDP losses between in 2020 of 445 billion baseline. So that's just the numbers, colleagues and esteemed colleagues and ladies and gentlemen. The projected recovery for 2021 is only going to be partial. The interesting thing for all of us is that the most affected economies are those with poor healthcare systems, those countries who rely heavily on tourism, international trade, commodity exports, and those with high debt burdens and high dependence on the volatile international financial flows. So the overall economic and socio-economic impact of this pandemic remains uncertain. Importantly, because of this pandemic, global extreme poverty will rise for the first time in over 20 years, adding up as many as 150 million people by 2021 to this global extreme poverty number. This is according to the United Nations. So the challenges are huge. The challenges are huge for West Africa, which at the time was the fastest growing, at some of the fastest growing economies in that region, according to the African Development Bank. It's important for your part of the world in East Africa, because East Africa is regarded as the fastest growing economic region on the continent. And the coronavirus came and struck. Also in East Africa, at the same time, you had a locust infestation. And so this increased the problem for the regional farmers, according to the African Development Bank. So the responsibility on rebuilding a post-COVID economy is really, really huge for all of us. Revenue authorities in a post-COVID-19 environment and during COVID-19 took a huge amount of responsibility. ITF conducted 2 webinar series with heads of tax in March and in April. I had conversations one-on-one with about 15 heads of tax across the continent during this lockdown. And it became clear that tax administrations and revenue authorities took huge responsibility during this time. Many administrations took responsibilities to beyond what is normally their responsibility of revenue collection. This included using the agility, the revenue administration IT system, the staff, the distribution and communication networks. Revenue authorities were involved in relief schemes, social welfare distribution of food, healthcare, the distribution of PPE, the personal protection equipment. And it is clear that the infrastructure of many revenue authorities across the continent was what the broader government relied on in its broader distributional and intergovernmental, interagency cooperation networks. It is also clear to us in our own surveys that those revenue authorities and those countries who had good information technology infrastructure were the ones who came out better out of this. In the many conversations I've had, those revenue authorities with poor IT infrastructure simply could not make it. Those with poor infrastructure struggled to communicate with taxpayers, struggled to get their filing on time. When staff had to work from home, it was almost impossible to keep the revenue administration going. But those, including Kenya and a few countries around Southern and East Africa, and parts of West Africa and North, where there was strong IT infrastructure, those were the stronger ones, not the winners, the stronger ones, if I can call it that. And so revenue authorities were called upon during the virus now to do extraordinary work. And although the pandemic has caused devastation everywhere and there's no certainty where it will go, many lives were lost globally, Africa was spared a big amount of the numbers. I think some of the big numbers are coming from South Africa. Now, what does all of this mean, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, esteemed guests? It means that in a post-COVID environment, domestic resource mobilization is going to take center stage. Revenue administration, tax policy, legislation is going to take the center stage in a post-COVID-19 recovery, because we are going to need huge financial resources, both for a post-COVID-19 recovery, but also remember, we are still dealing with the Sustainable Development Goals. We are still dealing with Agenda 2063. The excitement of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement is with us, and although the implementation has been postponed, the economic benefits of it is a lagged benefit. It's a medium-term benefit. The immediate is the reduction in customs-related income for all of the countries. A reduction, not an increase in the immediate. So where will the alternative, how are we going to replace that customs income? So the pressure or the challenge that we have is a post-COVID-19 mobilization of taxes, Agenda 23 mobilization of taxes, Sustainable Development Goals, and then the immediate impact of the free trade agreement will be a reduction in income. We need to make up for all of that, and that's the challenge of tax policy and administration. And so that is the discussion. The discussion in a post-COVID environment must be, how do we sustain and improve revenue collection in a post-COVID environment? And today, I'm looking forward to a panel that will share tax insights in terms of their own country experiences, their own outlook, and how we can share both at a tax policy and a revenue administration level the challenge of improving revenue collection. Let me conclude by raising one or two high-level areas where we think the money can come from. In ATAF, we believe that Africa has done quite a bit in dealing with, in the broader basket of taxation, in dealing with VAT policy and legislation, and also in improving its ability to collect VAT. We don't encourage the broadening of that, because VAT is, while it is easy to collect, is regressive in its nature, and it disproportionately taxes poorer people. It disproportionately taxes women and sectors that are really important for human capital and economic growth. It's in the corporate taxation, it's in the broader income tax, both on the corporate side and in the taxation of high net worth individuals and politically connected persons, that in Africa the tax opportunities lie, especially in the extractive sector and in multinational corporations on the corporate side. We do believe that taxation of digital businesses, the current discussions taking place in Paris, is going to be incredibly important. Now, I know Kenya, for example, has introduced forms of digital services tax, but I also know that America has threatened you as a result. But they've also threatened many other countries who are introducing digital services tax. We have brought out guidelines for countries who wants to introduce digital services tax while the world is still deciding how to tax this new phenomenon. So taxing multinational companies properly, introducing transfer pricing legislation, doing audits, and the type of technical work that ATAF has been supporting across the continent that has brought in $1.2 billion in tax assessments over the past 4 years, that is where the money is going to lie. Looking at property taxes, the type of taxes that we haven't done. Not increasing taxes, not burdening taxpayers with higher taxes. It is broadening the base and optimizing and efficientizing what we are currently doing. And let's face it, countries like Kenya, South Africa, Nigeria, Uganda are leaders in this. And part of our responsibility in ATA, oh, of course, Morocco and Egypt as well. Egypt post their own uprisings and recovery is showing the way. And part of our job in ATA is to share this, to provide the technical assistance, and to work with some of the leaders on this panel here today in order to bring back some of that lost revenue and to face the challenges of a post-COVID-19 pandemic for revenue mobilization. Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much, Logan. And we really appreciate you setting the stage for the conversation that we are going to have this morning. Like I said, we will hear from a number of tax administrators across the continent. And just to, recap on what Logan was saying, this coming at a very interesting time when, the continent has set many goals for itself. Agenda 2063, we've got the SDGs. And when it seemed particularly that the East African economy was on an upward trajectory. Nonetheless, this is the challenge we have been presented with, and it is one that we intend to absolutely succeed at. So Logan, thank you very much for joining us. And we hope you will stay with us, Logan, because we will have a question and answer session, and we would love any of the input that you would be able to give us in the course of this session this morning. Logan, of course, began by congratulating our very own Commissioner General, who just yesterday was nominated to be a council member of the African Tax Administration Forum. Let's congratulate Bwana Commissioner General once more. Thank you so much. Congratulations, and we look forward to the great contribution you will give on behalf of the country, on behalf of the KRA, and shine a light to what we can do here, and indeed representing the region. So congratulations for that. And without much ado, let me now invite you, Bwana Commissioner General of the Kenya Revenue Authority, Mr. Gideon Boro, to come and give us your presentations on what Kenya's journey has been and what some of the strategies are that we have employed during this time. Give him a round of applause, tafadhali. Karibu sana.
Distinguished taxpayers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this second day of our tax summit. Thank you very much for being there to engage in this dialogue, and very much grateful indeed. Let me start by appreciating the nomination into the council membership of the ATAF. I want to thank all the African tax administrations for having a very successful General Assembly and conducting a very successful election yesterday. And I'm very grateful for the nomination and election into the membership of the Council of the ATAF. I believe together we will continue building ATAF as a voice for Africa. Thank you very much, Logan, for your comments that are very, very well articulated. Now, I do not wish to go to the African or the world economic outlook that Logan has very well articulated. I think for me, I would go straight to the Kenyan context, where we are. And if you can move the slides a bit. There. Just to note that Over the last number of years, between 2015 and 2019, our average economic growth range is 6.6%, 5.6%. But in 2020, as a result of COVID-19, that has dropped to 2.4%. So we are looking at the impact of COVID to our environment. The National Treasury projects a 2020 growth of 2.5%, while the World Bank forecasts a 1.5% growth of our economy. It is important because tax growth is always in tandem with the growth in the economy. So as the world economies shrink, as the growth decline, that is our environment, that our average growth has dropped from 5.6 to the 2.4 in the year 2019-2020. 2020 expected to grow at 2.5 by our National Treasury, and that is the basis of the projections that they have made in terms of tax collections. The World Bank has a projection of 1.5. In terms of revenue impact, we at this point cannot fully determine what will be the revenue impact against the target for this particular year. What we can note is that the impact on revenue will largely depend on the economic recovery. If the economy is able to recover this particular year, if things turn out better than projected, then we can expect better tax collections. We are also going to, the recovery of taxes is also going to depend on the tax measures, tax policy measures the Kenyan government is going to put in place. And also it is also going to depend on efforts of tax administration. So my presentation will just focus on those three areas in terms of what we are doing. Suffice to say that the performance for the first quarter, July-September, we recorded a deficit in revenue of 5.2 billion. That represents a decline of 14% against the same period last year. And so we are outlining the impact of COVID-19. So the impact is that we have a deficit that we are looking at, and I believe that that is what we'll be dealing with in the coming days. So some of the impacts of COVID-19 is what we call a decline in employment levels. And I don't think I need to continue discussing this particular issue because this has been well articulated that many economies globally have faced declined employments. Actually, a number of economies have even seen massive loss of jobs. Here in Kenya, we have witnessed the same decline in employment, which have impacted our PYE negatively. We have seen businesses, the level of businesses decline. We have also seen in terms of, for example, the level of excise tax that we collect from the alcoholic industry went down significantly. I will be outlining that in a moment. But let me talk about the policy changes that the government put in place that also impacted on our revenue. And one of them is the decline or the reduction of the tax rate from 16 to 14%. We also had a reduction of individual tax rate from top bracket from 30 to 25 and corporation rate from 30 to 25. And we also were able to ensure that people earning below 24,000 shillings a month do not pay taxes. We'll be seeing the impact of that in a moment. Our worst performance was in May 2020. And in this particular month, we collected 83 billion out of a target of 130 5 billion. And this was a performance of 62.2%, which is our worst performance. We had a deficit that particular month of 50 billion. This significant decline in revenue may be the worst we have faced in a decade. We, however, I think it's very clear why this kind of a decline came in. This was the height of lockdown and cessation of movements in that particular month. But coming to June, and our country was able to start relaxing the measures, and we were able to see some significant recovery of the economy, and we ended at around 74% of the target, down from 62 in that particular year. So these measures that were implemented by government were estimated that this particular year they will transfer to citizens by April 2021 a gross amount of 183 billion, meaning that the government will have forfeited that kind of revenue. And these transfers are intended to cushion the citizens and the economy against the COVID-19 pandemic. Cumulatively, these measures, like I said, have already transferred 63 billion to the citizens. That is from April to the end of September. And some of these things are not brought out in many other conversations. Let me go to the impact of how we dealt as a revenue authority. You move forward. Continue moving forward. The slides, yes. Let me look at how we have dealt with this challenge as a revenue authority. And we categorize our activities. We have what we call service delivery activities. What we did to improve service delivery, what we did to improve trade facilitation, and what we did to improve business continuity, and what we did in terms of people management. Finally, we'll talk about a few things of what we did in terms of revenue and enhancing the revenue. In terms of service delivery, I think Logan has put it very clearly that tax administrations that are highly automated did much better than those that were not. So for us, we were able to, despite the COVID-19, continue engaging our taxpayers through virtual dispute resolution sessions. So we continued engaging our taxpayers virtually, and we were able to collect significant revenues through these processes. We were also able to divert our traffic or engagement with taxpayers to online channels, emails, calls, social media, and chats. So we kept our taxpayers engaged through those platforms, and we continued focusing on relationship management. We reduced what we call face-to-face, but definitely it was inevitable for Kenya Revenue Authority in some areas, like the borders, completely. And in those particular areas, we focused a lot on protecting our staff in terms of providing them with the facilities that they need. For example, the masks, what you call the protective equipment, and also ensuring that they are safe in terms of how they engaged with taxpayers. As a region, we implemented jointly with the other EAC members what we call the guidelines, and I think Logan has also mentioned about guidelines, ATAF guidelines on handling COVID-19. We also had guidelines for the region. We continued engaging through interministerial approach to address COVID-19 challenges. the region continued holding those kind of engagements and agreeing on how to deal with our border issues. We continued ensuring that the movement of people across the borders, people were tested and supported. Those who were found to be positive were supported. We also continued waiving what we call storage charges at the ports. You realize that because of interruption of the chains, of supply chain, many people were not able to clear the goods on time. And therefore, we were facilitating them by ensuring that they have what you call, we waived the charges, warehouse charges. We also facilitated those who are returning residents because sometimes there were delays in trade. There were a lot of charges that were accumulating in the port, so we facilitated them. The other thing we did is to ensure that we have paperless operations, meaning that we optimized the use of technology. Our scanners came in handy. We have deployed a lot of scanners and we are continuing to deploy more, and this helped us a lot because we did not need to verify goods physically. So we continued utilizing our scanners to ensure that then we facilitate trade. We also continued to ensure that the safety in those areas, because the borders were considered very high risk areas. So we continued to ensure that they are properly protected, fumigated. We suspended importation of second-hand clothes. We expedited clearance of critical supplies like medical supplies. We facilitated transshipment of containers cargo from road into marine boats through Kisumu Paya for delivery into Uganda. We were rerouting the empty trucks from Uganda to reduce congestion at the borders. We did a lot of work in terms of facilitating trade. In terms of business continuity, we were very much concerned about the safety of our staff. So we implemented a number of COVID-19 measures, which included ensuring that our staff are safe, they have what they needed in terms of protection. We implemented the Ministry of Health measures of distance, of fumigation, of sanitization. All of them we implemented. We used our contact centers to ensure that we did not interact with the taxpayers. We reduced that contact. And we continued our vibrant communication to our staff. We had to continue with our learning or training of our staff through our academy. I think our academy came in very handy, and it is one very, very important institution that we are using to train our staff virtually. So we did not stop training. So we are still training our staff virtually through our academy, that is the KESRA. Of course, initially you remember very well that one of the biggest challenge of disruptions we had from this disease was fear. And we had to try very much and stabilize our staff to ensure that they do not fear, they feel supported. We were able to give every one of them the laptops that they needed. We acquired what you call the platforms for having meetings. We now do not really have physical meetings. And we made sure that they have all the tools that they needed, the VPNs to work at home, upgraded our internet bandwidth. We improved the security in our systems, and we even purchased for them. We fully facilitated them in terms of working from home. We also did a little bit more in terms of revenue collection. I think that being a very important area. One of the things that we did to keep our businesses running is to ensure that we expedited the payment of refunds to those businesses. And I think this period of time, we paid the highest level of refunds to about 26 billion worth of refunds to facilitate our businesses so that they could continue generating revenue. But in terms of growing our tax base, we focused so much on the digital economy, and we have been growing this particular revenue. In fact, we have grown the revenue from the digital marketplace, and like I said yesterday, we expect to expand this revenue to about 5 billion in between January and June, when the digital service tax comes into effect. I heard Logan mention that, of course, there are jurisdictions that are not happy with the digital service tax, but I think and I believe that Kenya, every jurisdiction maintains some level of independence in terms of doing what they believe is right for the economy. And Kenya, as Kenya, we have moved forward to implement this tax, and we believe it is good for our country and our people. We have continued strengthening our IT systems. We are working very hard to ensure that every of our IT system remains on and working and sound, because IT, or use of technology, remains the biggest support for revenue mobilization moving forward. I don't see any other. It is the use of technology that in terms of revenue collection that is going to support our work. We have what we call data-driven compliance. And so what we do now, we use our data, and then we evaluate what comes out of that data. Then we communicate with the taxpayers those findings, and we engage electronically. So our iTax system has come in handy because it has all the information we need about a taxpayer. We only need to build a little bit more from the external databases. Like I said earlier, our enhanced dispute resolution mechanisms comes in very strong, and our utilization of third-party data for compliance. So by and large, as I finish, because I don't think my presentation go beyond there, is to say that moving forward, the outlook we have for the Kenyan economy is positive. But this positivity will depend on a number of things that the economy must continue to grow for us to continue collecting taxes. Number two is that the tax policy measures that are put in place must support a growth in revenue collection. But on our part as tax administration, we shall continue ensuring that we validate all the information, because one of the biggest risks you have right now under COVID-19 pandemic are people not paying their rightful taxes and blaming COVID. So as KRA, we are validating everything you tell us. Yeah, if you tell us you didn't make money, we ask you, and how did you pay your rent? And how did you survive? So we really have to, as a business, we have to know if you didn't make money, how are you then continuing to support your operations? So we are validating all the information that we are receiving from taxpayers. That is number one. Number two, we are focusing on the digital marketplace because that is where the transactions have shifted to. And number three, we are expediting our dispute resolution because we have about over 200 billion tied up in disputes. And our focus is to ensure those 200 billions tied up in disputes are resolved. And under this environment, taxpayers would like to delay those dispute resolution as far as possible so that they don't pay. But you see, for us, we are encouraging them that let us resolve the dispute, let us discuss payment plans. And so we are supporting them towards that. I want to leave it at that, Yvonne, and thank you very much.
Thank you very, very much, Bwana Commissioner General, and some great insights. I believe the idea of some people taking advantage of loopholes also came up yesterday, and it's important to see that that is something that is being looked into. It's interesting to note that, Commissioner General, you celebrated your first anniversary as Commissioner General, right in the middle of a pandemic that nobody could have anticipated. And so, a lot of what has been done and your leadership in steering this, is worth commending. And no doubt your 21 years experience in tax administration is something that will come in handy. So thank you once again for that. Now that we've heard about the Kenyan experience, and some of which was interesting in terms of the tax measures that were put in place, but also importantly, supporting the workers. And I like what you talked about, people are fearful and people at the heart of any organization and any business. So facilitating them to continue to work and also giving them peace of mind is absolutely important in terms of any strategy, any development plans that you put in place, because it is the people that will carry those plans forward. So asante sana. That's been the Kenyan experience. What about the South African experience? Let's move from the east all the way to the south. And next up is Nathaniel Mabetoa. He's the regional director of the Gauteng North Operations from the South African Revenue Services. Mr. Mabetoa, welcome to this session and give us your insights. We want to know what's happening in your region and what some of the strategies are that you've put in place at this time. Karibu sana, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, facilitator, for this time. I want to greet all of you, the fellow panelists, as well as all the participants in the room and joining us via different other channels. It's indeed a great opportunity for us to be here. I bring you greetings from our commissioner, Mr. Edward Kisvita, as well, and bring you greetings from the 11,000 or so employees of the South African Revenue Services. I want to maybe kick off by just giving you a sense of the impact that COVID has had on South Africa. I think Logan mentioned that South Africa would be the hardest hit in terms of all the other African countries. At the height of the pandemic, around July 14th, 29th of July, we were sitting at about 173,000 active cases in South Africa. We are sitting at about 50,000 currently. Yesterday, when I checked the numbers, our death rate just for yesterday was 74 people, South Africans that we lost due to the pandemic yesterday alone. The total that we're sitting on currently of people that have passed on due to COVID is sitting at 19,539 as we speak today. Even though our recovery rate is sitting at 90.2%, we are still not out of the woods. There's always the possibility of a second wave that we are pretty much conscious of as a country. And I think there are a number of measures that are being taken to make sure that we avoid getting into that stage. I just thought that I should give you that high-level view just to get you a sense of where we are as a country, and it basically would paint the picture in terms of everything else that I'm going to be talking about on the impact that this has had on the revenue collections. In the organization itself, we've had a total of about 703 cases. Our colleagues that have been infected, and we unfortunately lost 9 colleagues due to COVID. So not only have we seen this spike throughout the country, but also within the organization, we've really had some losses as well. What is very good is that our recovery rate is quite high, sitting at 95% within the organization. So we have very few active cases as we speak, and we are very vigilant in terms of making sure that colleagues are well protected if and when they are required to be in the offices, as they have been provided with protective material to make sure that they are, and equipment to make sure that they are safe. Let me turn to the impact of COVID on the revenue collections. And overall, as we look at the impact that we have seen in collections, we are 18% down in terms of comparing to last year in our revenue collections. That is about 117 billion rands below where we're supposed to be. So if you do a year-on-year comparison, it's an 18% drop in the overall revenue collections. Employee tax down by about 11.6%, and that is largely driven by the fact that we've shared quite a lot of jobs in the economy. Around 2.2 million jobs have been lost. Largely, most of those have been in the finance space, in manufacturing, in construction, as well as in wholesale. CIT, corporate income tax, has also seen a decline of 22.7% year-on-year comparison, which is quite huge. But what is of concern on this one is the fact that we've also seen an increase in business rescue applications that have gone up to 75%. And this really speaks to a capacity erosion in the corporate space. Liquidation applications around the same time have gone up by 11% year-on-year comparison. Again, this is of concern to us because it speaks to the erosion of the economic capacity in the corporate income tax space. Domestic VAT, which is forming quite a big component of our structure in terms of our revenue, has seen a decline of 6.7%, and again driven by manufacturing. As you would know, that during the hard lockdown, tobacco and alcohol were banned, and the excise kind of component of that has been one of the key drivers to that decline. We're still positive in terms of our revenue numbers, and we think that there are opportunities that exist. If you look at South Africa's tax to GDP percentage, we're sitting at between 22 to 25%. The OECD countries are sitting at about 31.5%. So there's still a bit of room for us to really extract a bit more. So our extraction rate can still go up, and we believe that there are opportunities for us to get to that level. So that's the impact that we have seen on the revenue piece. We remain vigilant in terms of making sure that we can claw back some of those losses and make sure that we restore the revenue collections going forward. Obviously, government has introduced a number of legislative amendments in response to COVID-19. So we've introduced the employee tax incentive scheme and had some extensions to it. We've had to put in some deferrals, for employee tax, where we've given some deferrals, 4 months deferrals on the payments of employee tax. We've also given deferrals for provisional tax, and we've been very lenient in terms of some of the payment periods and extending some payment periods just to give some relief on some of the areas. We've also given a skills development levy holiday as a measure going forward. And on the other side also, we fast-tracked the VAT refunds and the overall refunds process just to make sure that we improve the liquidity in the business space during this time. But there are a number of these that have been put in place to ensure that we can actually stimulate the economy at the same time start to protect the base going forward. Our economy obviously is really experiencing some tough times. We have modeled how we believe we're going to emerge as a country out of this. And there are kind of three scenarios that we've put in place very easily. The quick one that says we're going to have a quick kind of recovery. The slow one that says it's going to take a bit of time. And then the third one is what we see as the long recovery trajectory. And in kind of looking at each of those trajectories, the quick one, we believe that we will see a GDP of about contraction of about minus 5.4, taking into account that we're already sitting at a very low GDP growth even before COVID. And the sovereign credit rating downgrade has not really put us in a better position. So it's all those forces really that are buffeting against on us as an economy. On the one hand, the sovereign credit ratings downgrade, COVID on the other, and a very slow kind of growth in the economy. So the quick one, we believe that it's that kind of contraction, about 5.4, the slow one, about minus 12.1, and a long one would have an impact of a contraction of about 16.1%, all of which you can see that will have a big impact on the revenue collections. So it's dark clouds really gathering, but we are still quite positive in terms of how we're going to get out of this. And I'll talk about some of the things that we're putting in place to make sure that we can weather the storm, so to speak. So if you look at the first piece that I want to talk about around the different things that we're doing around the work arrangements for our people. So almost 85% of our staff are working from home. So they have been enabled to work from home. And this is on the back of a lot of technology developments that took place even prior to COVID that ensured that 95% of our services have been digitized and are electronic. So if you like, most of the interactions actually can take place electronically or virtually, and that has made it quite easy for us to cope with the work that needed to be done. As I said, 85% are deployed to work from home. It was an additional spending that we had to put in place to make sure that that happens, but all of our employees, all of the 85% are fully deployed and working from home as we speak. This means that they are having virtual meetings, virtual interactions. Taxpayers have had to make appointments in terms of interactions that they would have had to make directly in the branch offices, or interactions from our side in terms of the request for additional information, audits, and any other engagements that we have with the taxpayers. In terms of the processes, Logan spoke about the COVID-19 protocols. So those have been put in place. We have put in place an appointment-only branch visit arrangement. So taxpayers have had to call in or go onto the internet, onto our website to make an appointment to come into the branches so that we avoid, just the walk-in branch visits. And that is because our capacity in the branch offices, because of COVID, was cut down by 70%. So if you were to observe, the provisions of COVID-19, it meant that our capacity had to be cut by close to 70% in the branch offices. And therefore, we had to go onto the branch visits that are done only by branch appointment. That has worked very well. because as we were going through the peak of the pandemic, we were also going through our filing season. So, this is a very positive story in this whole thing, that we have been able to migrate almost 50% of those people that would have been coming into the branch offices into electronic channels. A large percentage of those has been done through your bring your own device sessions, where we have allowed taxpayers by appointment to come into the branch offices and to be assisted on their own devices using our own connectivity or data for them to actually do e-filing and to interact with us on electronic channels. What that has done going forward is that we have been able to migrate them into electronic channels, and we hope that they will stay on the electronic channels, because we've helped them through the bring your own device sessions to actually do it themselves instead of doing it for them. And we hope that that will stand us in good stead going forward. So again, I mean, COVID in this case has helped to catapult us and taxpayers into the electronic space, and allowed more and more of our interactions to be done electronically. The other intervention that we've put in place, which I believe is quite critical, has been that we've been able to have a growth of auto assessments. So what that means is that based on the third-party data that we've been able to collect, we have been able to put together a full returns and sent through to taxpayers a confirmation that says we've automatically assessed you, and you just need to look through and confirm, or if you want to edit, if we've left out anything, do make your edits on the return. But generally, if you are happy, you accept and you are filed. And that has been a 50% growth from last year, where we only did about 1.5 auto assessments. This year we did about 3.6 million auto assessments overall. So again, as I said, that has kind of put us in a good space, in that we've migrated and we've made it easy for taxpayers to comply, and all of those being done on a virtual platform. I think it's quite important to mention the point around, the fact that we believe that there has been an improvement in the service delivery. We've seen an increase in the contact center volumes during this time. We've seen an increase in the interaction on the electronic platforms. As I mentioned, that we've had a migration, a 50% migration of those taxpayers that would have walked into our branches during filing season, and we've only been able to serve from about 24% to about 12% of those in the branches during this time, all observing provisions of COVID-19. We've seen an improvement in the turnaround times as well. Because as things are done electronically, we're able to actually get the documents in and finalize cases much, much quicker. This is on the back of all the work that has been done previously in terms of building up e-channels and really investing in making sure that we migrate all the services and the processes into our electronic platforms. As we speak, we're sitting at almost about 95% of all our services are electronic or have been digitized. And that puts us in a much, much better position even going forward. And it has really worked very well in terms of our ability to respond to the COVID challenge. Let me just say a few words as I conclude in terms of the way forward and what we want to do to make sure that we protect the base, and also, how are we going to make sure that revenue collections will continue during this period. The first thing is that we want to continue to enhance our third-party data use across the different areas. And to that extent, we are going to be looking at bolstering our ability to do and to work with big data across the different areas, to triangulate data that we have around what people are declaring and what they own, and what they are, their transactions are elsewhere in the economy. So there's a big piece of work that we are doing around big data, around really increasing the use of third-party data. We also want to look at the informal economy. In South Africa, the informal economy is growing. It's largely a cash-based economy. And we're looking at making inroads into that economy because we believe that that is also an area of growth. And not only are we looking at increasing our ability to collect taxes from that area, but also to support that economy in terms of the growth that is happening in that space. We are looking at increasing our critical skills around audits, transfer pricing, financial structuring, forensic auditors. So that's another growth area in terms of the skills that we're looking to bring in. The risk analysts, the data analysts. So if you like, there is the part around what our response is going to be in terms of the different types of economies and different activities that are happening in the different industries, but also there is the response that we are putting in place for the internal skills that we need to develop to deal with the new reality around the fourth industrial revolution. IT security experts, for instance, that we're looking to bring on board to make sure that we are aligned on the IT risk space as well. So these are some of the things that we're putting in place. Over and above improving efficiencies internally, we are looking at other skills that we need to bring in to ensure that we are able to improve our tax collection even during these challenging times. Let me stop there, Chair, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mabetoa from South Africa. Some important lessons, and we continue to wish you and your teams at the best. Thank you very much for the greetings from your Commissioner General, and indeed to the entire 11,000 staff members at the South African Revenue Service. And like we know, South Africa has had, the worst brunt of it, perhaps on the continent, even featuring in the top 10 lists across the globe. And even with that, we're happy to see that there is some good news. Managing to move 50% of your taxpayers to the online platform is something that is definitely good in the medium to long term. Now, I know we have our audiences who are watching on Zoom, and I can see you lifting your hands. Not to worry. We're seeing you, we're not ignoring you. Let me just give you a reminder of how you can post your questions and your comments. Remember, all of these presenters here from the various tax administrations will be here to answer a few of your questions. So rather than lift your hand on the Zoom platform, please just drop your comment or your question. As we did yesterday, we'll continue to make sure that we answer all of your questions. They'll all be here with us, including Kenya's Commissioner General of the Revenue Authority here. Will be answering your questions. We'll be taking your comments on what the experience is across the continent and perhaps what we can do, what we can learn from each other. There's quite a bit to do there. So from the south, we want to come back to the east and to a country that employed some strict measures very early on. If many of you will remember, Uganda, in fact, instituted a full total lockdown, even weeks before they recorded their first COVID-19 case. Now, whilst that was good for containing the spread of COVID-19, I'm sure it no doubt had some serious effects on revenue collection, revenue mobilization, and indeed the economic activity of the country. And that's why our next speaker will be interesting to hear his views on just how they managed through that situation, even now with the phased reopening. And a lot of those restrictions have been eased over time, over the last couple of months. And so our next speaker is the current Commissioner General of the Uganda Revenue Authority, John Musinguzzi. But he is a man who's had history in both public and private sector, having worked as an IT consultant with Safran Mofo, and as well working as a senior presidential advisor at State House in Uganda on investments and ICT matters, and at one point was the Special Revenue Protection Services Chief. at the Uganda Revenue Authority. He has been at the helm of the Uganda Revenue Authority since the 1st of April 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. And so his views today are very, very important, and we would definitely love to hear from you. Let's give a warm round of applause to John Musinguzzi, the URA Commissioner. Mr. Musinguzzi, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello, sir. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, sir. Please carry on. Welcome.
Hello. Hello.
Can you hear us?
You can hear
Can you
me?
hear us, sir? Mr. Musinguzzi, can you hear us from here in Nairobi? All right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Our session chair, the panelists, participants online and physical. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, our facilitator this morning, for the kind introductions. I'm John Musinguzzi Rujochi, the Commissioner General of Uganda Revenue Authority. It is a great pleasure for me to participate in today's annual tax summit by appreciating the organizers of this conference for putting measures in place to make sure that we do not miss this very important annual summit. May I also take this opportunity to congratulate our session chair, Mr. Logan, and the colleague leaders of the different revenue administration bodies
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be having a problem with the link
of the General Assembly elections yesterday. Nominated. My apologies. It seems I'm not being well received. Is that correct? Please bring my iPad.
Yes.
Let me use it without the image. There is a lag. There is a lag. Eh?
They can hear you.
Hello?
So, yes, Mr. Musinguzzi, we seem to be having a problem with your network. Hear us now? All right, let's sort him out. We definitely are looking forward to hearing that. You can see some of his slides. There's some important information that we will hear from Mr.
They don't
Musinguzzi
hear anything.
in just a moment.
Okay, now can I request that we disable?
Yes, Mr. Musinguzzi, we will get with you offline and make sure we have you here with your presentation in just a moment, sir. So let us carry
Hello?
on with that. All right, let's sort that out from Uganda because we definitely want to hear that one out. As we sort that out, allow me to move from Uganda to Sierra Leone. Mr. Samuel Jibao, who's the Commissioner General of the National Revenue Authority from Sierra Leone. Interesting perspectives we hope to hear from there. We will come back to Uganda in a moment. Mr. Jibao, good morning. We trust you can hear us from Sierra Leone.
It is just
These are the vagaries of technology. We get to improve as we go across the continent. Dr. Jibao, can you hear us? All right. Give me 1 minute, ladies and gentlemen. Let's see what we can do about this. All right. Can we try Nigeria? Ladies and gentlemen, I feel like we're taking a trip through Africa in a few minutes. Uganda, a little bit, Sierra Leone, a touch there. It seems to be a bit of a touchdown. But just bear with us. Technology is what it is, and this is what COVID-19 has brought on us. We're learning, and perhaps this is a testament to the connections across the continent. In fact, the Minister of ICT, the Cabinet Secretary, should have been here to just see what the challenges are. No doubt he knows, just where we are with this one. So we've stepped a little bit in Uganda, a little bit in Sierra Leone. Let's try Nigeria, shall we? The Federal Inland Revenue Service is the tax administration authority in the Republic of Nigeria. And representing the executive chairman, may we please have Santa Bonjubola. I hope I have pronounced that right. I think I need to watch more Niger movies. Santa Bonjubola, who's representing the executive chair of the Federal Inland Revenue Service, joining us now to give us perspectives from this powerhouse economy in West Africa. Santa?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. I think you have done a very good job. The name is pronounced Sanya Bonjubola. And let me, on behalf of my executive chairman, apologize for his inability to be part of this event. He actually planned to attend in person, but due to a number of government activities, including the budget for 2021, he couldn't be with us at this meeting. My greetings to the Commissioner General of the KRA and Logan Watt, Executive Secretary of ITAF. I will share very briefly our experience in Nigeria. And I will start by saying that we started the year 2020 with a change in management. The current executive chairman came on board towards the end of 2019, and it was just about settling down when the COVID-19 broke out, and we were Nigeria was one of the countries that first recorded victims. Albeit, I think God has been very kind to us in Nigeria. We have recorded about 63,000 cases to date, about 1,200 fatalities all through the country. The spread had been largely curtailed, not because of anything special that we have done. That is to my understanding, but as to our economy before the outbreak of COVID-19, our economy was actually not looking good due to downward pricing of petroleum products in the world market. Nigeria's economy depends 60-70% on the sale of petroleum products. And there had been some glut in the international market for some time now. And that had badly affected the economy of the country. Now, upon the advent of COVID, our government first proclaimed a 2-week lockdown and which we thought was a joke. In fact, everyone in Nigeria was just laughing at the government to say, what kind of a joke is this one? And then 2 weeks became 1 month, to 3 months, to 4 months, and to nearly 5 months. And then when issues of fatalities begin to come, I think the people became conscious that the issue at hand was a very serious one at that. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Yes, can. Thank you very much. Now, as a nation, what did we then do with a view to getting the economy running and as tax authority for us to be able to continue to collect our revenue? Having locked down the economy, having locked down movements all over the country, the Federal Inland Revenue Service has about 200 branch offices all across the world, the country. Some it will take 2 days to travel from one end to another end because of the size. Now we had to lock down all our offices. Now we had serious challenges with deploying technology because some of our branches have very poor access to power and very poor access to telecommunication facilities. And this was our major headache starting off with this. Howbeit, our branches in the major cities, we were able to continue to reach our customers remotely. We had to deploy more internet facilities for our workers so that we could meet virtually, also so that we could reach our taxpayers. We then used communication, internet communication, to reach most of our stakeholders. For example, we had to resort to issuing many press releases so that we could send messages to our taxpayers as regards issues of filing obligations, payment obligations, and all the like. Equally, we had to suspend tax audits for a period of time, and also every form of visit to our tax offices during this period. And coupled with the fact that government revenue was actually going down very badly, we needed to ask ourselves what measures we would put in place to be able to raise revenue, even when we were not going to the offices and when taxpayers could not come to our offices. The starting point we needed to do was to boost the morals of our taxpayers. And so during the lockdowns, we had to be making press releases almost every other day to speak and engage with the taxpayers. Even ordinarily, sometimes to just identify with them, to just say, we are just bringing greetings to you, so that they know that we are there and that they also know that we care about them. And then as part of government's palliatives to assist the citizens to cope with the problems of COVID, the Federal Revenue Service also had to roll out a number of measures to assist taxpayers. We had to push back the filing timelines. We had to push back the timing for payment timelines. We waived interest and penalties on late filings of returns. We waived interest and penalty in respect of liabilities that became due as a result of audit or examinations. We allowed our individual taxpayers to hold on to filing returns for some time. These are some of the immediate measures that we employed to help our taxpayers. Then we still had a problem. We still needed to raise money. Now, we all will recall that in all of this time, some businesses were doing good. And one of those businesses was the telecom industry, particularly in Nigeria. And so we engaged with the industry to say that we know that everyone is affected by the COVID-19 issue. Howbeit, we have discovered that you are actually working and making money. Therefore, will you be kind to ensure that you do not stop payment of your taxes? And so we engaged with them in a very constructive way, and some other businesses that were doing well, even though the whole economy was doing badly. And as a result of that, and the manner in which we approached the businesses in those sectors, they kept up tax payments. And this assisted Nigeria significantly, particularly the Federal Revenue Service. We were able to match our first half performance of 2019 and slightly exceed it, despite the fact that majority of our taxpayers were not paying taxes, were not filing returns because of the effect of the COVID-19. Part of what we also did was to see how we can assist taxpayers who really were willing to pay, but because of the lockdown, could not have access to our offices and to the banks. And therefore, we opened up our payment channels such that our taxpayers pay their taxes using various payment cards, which were not open like that before. And as a result, some businesses that were open or that were doing businesses or that were having tax payments and were willing and ready to pay, they were able to come up with their payments. They were able to make their payments in the comfort of their rooms or wherever they may be. Now, part of what we also did during this period was to re-engineer our business processes, because it suddenly came to us that we couldn't do business as usual. That is, go to the office in the morning, come back in the evening, have meetings and all of that. And so the tax authorities, the FRS, had to deploy connectivity facilities to host of our workers. Virtual meetings, departmental meetings, functional meetings, including meetings with taxpayers, were moved on to online platforms. Also, part of what we did internally in order to ensure business continuity was to ensure that we got passes for senior officers. Those were the directorate cadre officers. We were able to speak with government, and they gave passes to enable our very senior officers to visit the office, to keep our computers running those essential services that will enable our taxpayers to reach out to us remotely, that also enable us to interact remotely with other officers and other stakeholders. This was very significant for us because if we had been totally locked out of the office, the system would have powered down at one time or the other, more so that public electricity is not very constant. In Nigeria, it's one of our major headaches. And so we needed to put people who will run the alternative energy sources, people who will ensure that the computers, the servers are running, the networks are maintained, and all of that. Part of what we also did was to assist officers. We didn't have many of our officers infected, but the few, I can't remember the number now, that were infected, the management had to rally around to arrange for assistance, to assist them whether they were in hospital isolation facilities or they were isolated in their individual dwelling places. The management had to find a way to reach out and to assist them. One of the major issues that COVID brought to Nigeria was issue of stigmatization, and then the way the management of the FRS handled this did not permit this issue to come up within the service. Now, what was our performance revenue collection-wise during this period? Like I said, we were already having serious troubles by the beginning of the year with the economy. The economy was already showing trend of negative growth. And so January wasn't particularly very good. Same with February when the lockdown started. However, due to the various measures, and particularly what I would see as our triumph card was our engagement with some of the segments of our taxpayers who were not badly or as badly affected by COVID-19 as others, to encourage them to keep on tax compliance. That helped us a lot. And also our officers, particularly our functional heads, our office heads, there were instructions for them, even though they couldn't go to offices or taxpayers' offices, to constantly engage taxpayers by telephone calls, by email, by WhatsApp, and by every means possible, to keep up those who can pay, to keep up paying. By the time we got to June 2020, all of these measures paid off, such that we matched and exceeded marginally our performance in 2019 by about 2%. We had actually expected a decline in view of the economic challenges. Howbeit, we were able to hold the line and push it a little bit by about 2%. Now, what now are we doing for the future? Now, a very good lesson had been learned by us in Nigeria with respect to COVID-19. And one big lesson that we have learned is that we must think out alternative ways of doing business. We must then see how people could work from home. We must put in structures that will enable and ensure that we engage with our taxpayers irrespective of their location. And also, we need to ensure that our taxpayers are able to fulfill their obligations in every form without having to visit our tax offices. these were the lessons for us that we learned. And so what are we doing to ensure that we translate these lessons into specific action and to profits in the future? What we have done is to identify that going forward, technology will be the driver of our business. Communication will be an enabler of our business. And with this, what the management of the service had done is to go out and seek out young persons. And as we speak, we have over 100 new engagements in ICT technology in various fields. Those who can write computer codes, those who are good in telecommunications, and all of that. They are currently undergoing specialized training for the purposes of deploying them to man the technology application in the service. Part of the work we are doing as to realize that is to begin to speak to experts in the ICT world as to develop a brand new system to run our operations. And the expectation is that within 1 year, to transform our processes from what we have currently, which is 60, 70 manual activity, to almost 100% running on technology. This is what we currently are putting in place. Secondly, is the need to retrain our existing officers to migrate their skills onto technology platforms. Again, a lot of investment is starting to move on into this direction. The third thing that we are doing currently as part of our efforts to ready ourselves for the future is a change to our legislations. As currently constituted, our tax legislations only support minimal deployment of technology. And so we are working with the Parliament in Nigeria. As we speak, we are developing the 2020 Finance Bill to support the 2021 budget. And one of the major issues being addressed in the proposals in the bill is the ability of the Federal Inland Revenue Service to deploy technology into every aspect of tax administration, beginning with registration, filing of returns, payment of taxes, tax audits, remote access to taxpayer data for the purposes of taxes, and all of that. So we are hoping that by the time we have the Finance Act 2021, Nigeria will have a robust legislative framework for the deployment of technology for tax purposes. Part of what we are doing is engagement with all stakeholders. And this includes persons in business, the trade associations, the labor unions, the National Assembly, that is our parliament, to engage with them in respect of changes that will come in our processes going forward, such that when the laws are in place, the infrastructures are in place, everyone will be on the same page as to implement the new system. I think finally, in closing this round, let me say that we have learned so much from the happenings of the COVID-19. It has affected us very badly, the economy-wise, even though God has been good to us, that the effect in terms of fatalities, comparing the size of the country, and also the kind of our community way of life, God has been very kind to us to minimize the infections and also the fatalities in Nigeria. It has cost us very much economically. I mean, in the past few weeks, we have also had another problem with civil disturbances arising from protests. But in all of this, the FRS has learned that business cannot be as usual, or better put, we needed to define a new normal of doing businesses. And for me, that is a good lesson we have learned, and it's a good plus that we have coming out with from COVID-19. I think, Mr. Chairman and organizers, I want to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bonjubola. I've been practicing that. And thank you very much for the insights. I would like to just remind you, sir, to remain with us. We're having a question and answer session, and we've already gotten in some really good feedback, and we'd love to hear your insights and your views on that as well. Please pass our regards and our greetings, warm greetings from all of us here in Nairobi, Kenya, to the Executive Chair. Mr. Mohamed Nami, we thank you for your time and your insights, but stay with us. The question and answer session is coming. I'm seeing some great questions that continue to come in. The hashtag is Tax Summit 2020, and we will get to that in a moment. But I'd like to now come back to Uganda. We believe we've fixed the problem, and as you know, if you've been on a Zoom meeting, who has not been in a Zoom meeting in 2020? Is there anyone? No, absolutely not. You might have been living under a rock if you've not. So as you know, when there's issues with the network, then you join via audio only. And that is what we want to do with Mr. Musinguzzi, who's the Commissioner General of the Uganda Revenue Authority. And just to give some background, Uganda, very adept at handling pandemics. COVID-19 was not something that they had not seen before. They've had some great experience with Ebola, considering their neighbors, with the Marburg fever, with Lassa fever. And so COVID-19, whilst it was huge and had some great impacts, it's definitely something that many people say the country and the government of Uganda have been adept at. But that notwithstanding, it no doubt had some effects on the economy. And let's hear now from Mr. Musinguzzi on some of the measures that they put in place, some of their policies that his administration has put in place to cushion the economy, and of course, what the outlook is. Mr. Musinguzzi, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. My sincere apologies for the failed attempt to communicate earlier. True, as facilitators put it, I'm in one part of the country which is remote and the internet connectivity is limited. So thank you for allowing me to present very briefly using the voice communication. I hope you can hear me clear this time round. Now, I had already gone through the protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, I salute you all, participants and panelists who are attending this summit. And indeed, I appreciate the organizers for bringing us together to share our experience in managing revenue collection during this period of COVID. The Ugandan experience, it has not been easy. Like all other countries, we have had the pandemic affect the economy, affect business from the month of February all through up to July. Our revenue collections were on a decline move, the worst months being the month of April and May, where we are collecting about 46% of the target. And but from the month of July, we have observed some positive improvement. As a matter of fact, the last quarter of July to September, Uganda Revenue Authority was able to collect and surpass our target by about 1 trillion Uganda shillings, which compared to the same period last year was a small growth of about 1.6%. And the biggest improvement was in the domain, therefore, as a effect on improving our measures in collecting domestic revenues. Also, the international taxes improved slightly in the first quarter. Now, let me share with you what we've done to ensure that we are able to operate and collect revenue that is more badly needed now during this COVID pandemic season by our governments. One, of course, without repeating what others have said, is to try and focus on the safety of our staff and our taxpayers. And this has been of the standard operating procedures that have been put in place by experts. I would like to tell you that at URA, we've had about 15 cases of COVID-19 infection, but from the study, it has been proved that none of these 15 have picked or have been able to infect their colleagues at work. Therefore, this has proved to us that yes, we can work despite the COVID, despite dealing with the highly exposed groups like the transit drivers and so on, and still stay safe by just observing the wearing of masks, the sanitizing all the time, the social distancing, and so on and so forth. So safety of our staff has been key, and we have ensured that through SOPs for COVID safety, through social distancing. We have put a number of our staff to work in shifts, also to work remotely from home. And this goes to confirm the importance of automation of systems as earlier put forward by my colleagues. So a number of our staff are able to work remotely from their homes to continue carrying on their tasks so as to reduce the congestion in the work environment. But also our taxpayers are able to do the filing, to pay, to make their payments online. So automation has been one clear support that has helped us continue collecting revenues during this COVID season. Now, briefly, there are other measures, and these were highly recommended by ATAF, and I'm sure the other agencies must have tried, like allowing taxpayers to pay in installments, allowing the warehousing of goods beyond the usual time so that people can first reorganize and get money to pay, extending the filing dates, and all these measures have also helped us in mitigating the effects of COVID. But we have also adopted other strategies like alternative dispute resolution, where we have encouraged taxpayers to come and we amicably settle our tax disputes. And that has brought voluntary disclosure, where our tax assessment and where previously they have not been accurate in filing their returns, they make those collections and we receive their taxes without penalizing them or charging them interest for the times they have not been compliant. All these have collectively improved our revenue collection. But ladies and gentlemen, I think the biggest lesson for us as Uganda Revenue Authority through this COVID pandemic has been the strength of cooperation. And that is why meetings like these ones are very critical, because going forward, there is no country that will succeed alone. Therefore, the story to our success will be in the regional cooperations, in the continental cooperation. It will be in fulfilling the continental free trade area, the regional trades, lifting the non-tariff barriers, because we found strength in dealing with our neighbors. And I want to thank sincerely our neighbors, especially our host today, the Kenyan government and the Kenya Revenue Authority, for facilitating trade during the difficult days of COVID-19 lockdown. As you know, our government took a deliberate decision to lock down everything except transit cargo and the inflow of goods into our country. So as much as we had the biggest exposure from the truck drivers, government was deliberate. They said business must continue, factories must continue to work. The cargo to our neighboring countries like Rwanda and Burundi and South Sudan, who transit through Uganda, these raw materials and essential goods must flow. So I want to thank our neighbors, the Kenyan Revenue Authority, for facilitating the safe and smooth flow of cargo for our countries, us that are landlocked, but also our central corridor neighbors, the government of Tanzania, for the cooperation to allow the flow of goods. For us, I think this has been the biggest lesson, and it is something we want to pick a lesson from as revenue agencies to take to a higher level, so that we have more cooperation in training our staff, in sharing experiences in forums like this one, in sending attachments to our respective countries, so that we are able to acquire skills and knowledge from our neighbors where they are doing well, so that we can apply this to our revenue agencies. But of course, the biggest effort we are putting on internally is the automation of our processes. Quite a number of our services are already online, but we are continuing to enhance this so that we can have at least 95 or thereabout percentage of all our services online, and to rely heavily on use of data. I think my colleagues mentioned this earlier. If there is anything that we must do during this time, is to be accurate in our assessments. And one way of doing this is decisions are guided by data. So we have deliberately set out to integrate with a number of agencies that hold data, like the utilities, the national databases, the lands registry. All these systems must be able to feed us with information which we can compare with our own revenue data, so that by the time we contact a taxpayer, or by the time we analyze what the taxpayer has submitted, we are guided by data and we are as accurate as we can be in assessing our taxes and implementing. We are also adopting a number of other technologies, maybe which other countries have already adopted, like the use of drones to do the surveillance of our porous borders, like the use of digital tracking solutions to be able to track a number of products that are manufactured or imported in the country, like the IFRIS, the electronic physical receipting and invoicing system, for us to be able to get accurate returns from our taxpayers. So all these things and much more in technology, we believe will increase our efficiencies in revenue collection. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for organizing this conference. I look forward to greater collaboration of our revenue agencies to learn from one another, so that we are able to collect better revenue. We are looking at taking lessons from those who are able to collect at least a significant percentage of the tax to GDP ratio. Uganda, we are still low at about 13–14%, but we are working to raise this to at least above 20%. As we had in our meeting yesterday, ETAF, there is no country that stands a chance to develop itself when we are collecting below 20%. And therefore, we look forward to further interaction with countries like South Africa, my colleague who just presented, who are collecting above 20% of their tax to GDP ratio, so that we can develop our nations. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I think the detailed presentation has already been sent and can be shared with the members. I just wanted to pick the key highlights of our presentation and what we have done to survive in this COVID pandemic. And I look forward to further interaction and sharing of experiences. Thank you so much for listening to me. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Musinguzzi. And we thank you for your patience even with the shaky network. And we hope that you can still stay with us for just a few moments. We're getting into our question and answer session. There might be some questions that may come your way. So we ask you to stay with us. Time for question and answer.
I'm online.
Thank you. I know you've been putting your hands up on the Zoom platform. You've posted your questions. At this point, we would want to get into some of those. We will be linking up with Sierra Leone in just a moment from their revenue authority. But as we do that, we can start to answer some of your questions. When they come in, we will gladly hear from Mr. Dr. Jibao, excuse me, and we'll get to hear from him as to what they're doing in Sierra Leone. But for now, I would please like to ask the indulgence of the Commissioner General, please, of the Kenya Revenue Authority. Please join me up here and let's get into some of these interesting conversations and answer some of the questions that our audience members have here for us. Remember, please continue sending them in. We have them here. We're taking a look at them. We'll try and get through as many of them as we can, but also remember, the hashtag is Tax Summit 2020. You can find us on Twitter. We're looking forward to answering your questions there as well. So here are a couple of questions that we have, and I'm also hoping that we have our other panelists, Sierra Leone, Sierra Leone will join us a little later, Nigeria, Uganda, South Africa, as well as, of course, our chair of the session. We're hoping that all of them are connected and are online, as some of the questions may be directed to them, and they are some interesting ones. So I think we can begin with, let me begin with you here, sir. The first question about what more revenue authorities can do in Africa to be more proactive, to respond quicker, maybe some lessons that have been learned. I mean, God forbid we have to go through another pandemic, but I guess just some lessons that we've learned in terms of being more proactive, not just for Kenya, but what you see for the region and the continent.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, and fellow panelists. First, I was very excited to hear that Uganda has met its target and surpassed by, I think, 1.6%. That is very, very positive. I'm sure we will be having further engagements with Uganda. Next week, we are having our regional meeting for Commissioner Generals of the region. And in that particular forum, I'm sure we will be able to engage more. Now, there are three, in terms of African tax administrations, I see the enhancement of revenue coming from a few approaches. One of them, we need to expand the tax base, ensure that everyone who is earning income contributes to tax. Of course, there are concerns that in most African countries, Kenya included, that we have a very narrow tax base, and we need to broaden it significantly, meaning that we may ensure that we bring as many people to pay taxes so that then we can grow the cake. So we in Kenya Revenue Authority we have a very rigorous program of enhancing the tax base. We are actually using all that taxpayer data we can get, mining all the data from third-party sources that can show that there is someone out there earning income and who is not paying taxes. So we are broadening the tax base. And in this broadening process, we are also now ensuring that we are in the digital space. And I believe for all global economies, we must tap every transaction in the digital marketplace, because those are the ones that are not very visible to many tax authorities. And they will ensure that even though many players are not in this domicile in Kenya or in those jurisdictions, they are able to pay taxes within the jurisdiction in which they generate revenue. So the digital marketplace is a place to watch, and Kenya Revenue Authority is leading in this area, because we've already determined and established, or rather we have already put legislation in that area. We have already determined the rate that we want to charge. We have engaged the stakeholders in that area, and they are ready and willing to pay the taxes. I think what they were wondering is how we are going to go about it. So broadening the tax base, tapping in the digital economy. Of course, we also believe that governments world over, and specifically in Africa and Kenya, very specifically, must be able to reduce tax expenditure. Tax expenditure is these incentives and remissions. These are the ones that undermine the tax base. That's why you can hear that some countries are collecting over 20% of GDP, others are collecting less. It's because the tax expenditure, especially in our country, is very high. 6% of GDP, while the average is about 3.6. So we are giving a lot out there. So when we minimize, when we reduce the tax expenditure, then we coupled with the efforts of the tax administration to expand the tax base, that will move our tax to GDP ratio from the current around 16% to over 20%. So that is, I think, the challenge to government and to policymakers specifically is to reduce tax expenditure, while the challenge to the Revenue Authority is to continue to ensure we expand the tax base and we enhance efficiency in the manner in which we collect taxes. We make it easier for people to pay taxes, and then we ensure that we support businesses in terms of those that have challenges to pay. We allow them time to pay, as long as we are convinced that they have real challenges and not that they don't want to pay. Thank you.
Yeah, and efficiency, expanding the tax base, finding new revenue streams. And I know the question about expanding the tax base is one we've had in the country for a while, but I guess never has it been more urgent than it is now. And there's a lot that's happening there. Perhaps Mr. Logan would have something to say on this from the African Tax Administration Forum. What would you say revenue authorities can do to ensure that they're more proactive and they have more innovations, particularly at this time of disruption?
Thank you. The Commissioner Generals that spoke and the representative from South Africa have far more eloquently explained what I could, because they run tax authorities, the generals in the field. And if you listen carefully to these contributions of Commissioner General Musinguzzi, Commissioner General Boro, and Mr. Mabetoa, also Mr. Gojembola, you would see that COVID-19 ignited innovation. And so it is not actually about COVID-19. It's about the nature of the responsiveness and the lessons. Because what did we hear today? We heard about the fundamentality of technology. We heard about the reward for putting the taxpayer at the center of what we do. Because taxpayers, just like when you go to a shop and people respond to service, people are loyal for being rewarded for service. And this is what these 4 contributions have demonstrated. They've also demonstrated, Commissioner General Boro, I'm interested in your thoughts. They've also demonstrated something that we don't talk about. What is the makeup? What is the design, the straw man or woman for that matter, of the new generation tax official? Is it the accountant who must go and analyze a tax structure? Or is the future tax official a technology person? Is the future tax official an agricultural expert that can go and understand the industry? Uganda has got a science lab, very innovative. Uganda employs people that can look for fake notes, that can look for material to find out what percentage of that material really came internally and what came from China, so that you can allocate the precise excises and taxes and nobody can lie to you. That is the new tax official. The new tax official, the old one who is an administrator, will now have to be retrained, will now do education and so on. So COVID-19, as these esteemed panelists have explained to you today, has showed us not only the need for innovation, but that these generals in the field have responded and they continue to respond. And so we need to look at a new set of training, a new set of tax administrator, a new set of skills for that. That's the one. But also, that's on the administrative side. But we also need to tighten our policy and our legislation, because that cross-border transactions that Mr. Musinguzzi and Commissioner General Boro have spoken about must be governed by laws and rules and legislation that Parliament must pass. Importantly, Commissioner General KRA very aptly spoke about tax expenditure. So two areas that in our tax administration and tax policy we urgently need to look at, there are many, would be the area of examining our tax treaties with other countries and what is contained in there, as well as the provision and the giving of tax incentives, because we sign away most of our tax. I'd like to conclude, because I also have to announce to you that I have to leave, unfortunately. I'd like to conclude with your indulgence, because I saw a question and I'd like to conclude answering that question. May I?
Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
Thank you. There's a question in the Q&A that I saw,
yes,
that asks about the issue of minimum tax. And the person is concerned that the charging of a minimum tax will chase investors away from Kenya, because investors would see the charging of a minimum tax as an additional burden. I want to link this to my issue of tax treaties. One of the big problems that Africa has is something called profit shifting and base erosion, where multinational companies declare their profits outside of the country where they make these profits. And often through the tax treaties that we've signed, and I see Kenya has reviewed, for example, their tax treaty with Mauritius, and through the tax treaties that they've signed, they can often register a lot of the parts of their businesses in low or no tax jurisdictions. What the world has done, it is trying to suggest that where companies are able through legal structures move their profits and shift it to low or no tax jurisdictions, like some islands, Bahamas, Bermuda, Mauritius, Seychelles, and so on, where they can do that, they get away with paying no tax. Part of the global move to reduce that is to say no company can move their profit without paying at least a minimum tax. So, for example, the current suggestion, global suggestion, is that all multinational companies pay a minimum global tax of 12.5%. And now the issue is who must get that 12.5%? In the case of Kenya, must Kenya get it, or must America get it if the company is domiciled in America? So the issue of source and residence. So that must still be clarified. But the bottom line is, at the moment, through tax treaties and other provisions, these multinationals can get away with paying no tax. The world is introducing a minimum tax. In Africa, through ATAF, and Mr. Kojambola leads the African discussions in Paris at the moment about this. He knows it better. What Africa is saying, what ATAF is saying at the moment is that minimum tax is not even enough, because the average corporate tax in Africa is 28%. between 28 and 32. So even if these companies do pay a minimum tax, they will still take the difference between 28 and 12.5 and move that out of your country. So I want to say to the questioner, and thank you for the indulgence, that whether Kenya charges that minimum tax or not, another country will charge that tax. It is your tax, and if you don't charge it, the country, for example, in Europe or America will take the money, because globally the company is required, will be required to pay that minimum tax. So if you choose not to take it, you're simply giving it away because somebody else is going to take it, because that minimum tax is compulsory. That is what I wanted to reply to that question. And with your indulgence, because I want to leave, I'd like to thank Commissioner General Mburu. Also congratulate Mr. Musinguzzi, who's also been elected to the ATF Council yesterday, and South Africa, who's now the Deputy Chair for Mr. Mabetoa. Congratulations. And thank you very much for the opportunity to participate. I unfortunately have to go to another meeting that cannot wait. I appreciate my attendance and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate your time, Mr. Logan Watt, Executive Secretary of the African Tax Administration Forum. Thank you very much, sir, and we wish you all the best in your day's activities, in the days, weeks, and months to come. All the best to you in South Africa and indeed your staff. Thank you very much for your guidance on this on a continental level. Thank you very much for that. Have a great day. I'd like us to continue with our conversation, and just a reminder to also all our panelists who are joining us online, if there is a question that's been asked and you want to jump in, please do so. I think if you can raise your hand, we will see it from our screens here. It is a conversation, and so let's try and have that as much as possible. Please chip in when you can. I'd like to talk about something else that is also important and a function of revenue authorities. And this is something I know you're passionate about, Commissioner General Mburu, the facilitation of trade. That's also a function of revenue administrations. And considering the effect of COVID-19 on supply chains globally, what role do you think, how has it been impacted? What role do you think, what sort of capacity building, facilitation to ease the process of the trade that's happening at the border points? I know Mr. Musinguzzi also talked about what they're doing at the borders, but let's start with you.
Thank you very much. We look at trade facility. First of all, we look at the role of Kenya Revenue Authority at threefold. We have the revenue mobilization, which is the most pronounced. We also have border security, because we make sure that people do not bring in this country things that can hurt our people. And thirdly, we look at trade facilitation, and trade facilitation can be domestic, local, and it can be also at the point of entry of goods. So I know Oecd Uganda has spoken a lot about the facilitation that we are doing to make sure that they have the goods alive in Uganda and our neighboring countries. But even for our domestic players who are bringing in goods, we have improved our processes at the port. We are ensuring that goods get in and are processed quickly, so we don't have to open all the containers. We have very modern scanners. In fact, we have a rail scanner where we have a rail scanner in Mombasa where you load the train and it can scan all the containers in 3 minutes as the goods are passing. You don't have to wait. You load about all the wagons, about 106 or so containers, and they pass, and in 3 minutes we have scanned, and all those images are relayed here in Nairobi. We have an integrated command center, and the analysts then begin to analyze. And before the goods arrive in Nairobi, they can see and isolate any container of interest, so that everybody else will just pick their goods and only the containers of interest where we can see inconsistency between what was declared. And so that is part of trade facilitation. The other element of trade facilitation, of course, is ensuring that we have what we have classified our importers into those that are in the green channel through our risk profiling mechanism. If you have been declaring correctly, we put you in a green channel. We don't look at your goods. What we do a post-clearance audit thereafter to just counter-check. So we have people in the green channel, we clear their goods, especially manufacturers who have been importing a lot of materials. So we also facilitate through that. We also have a very modern platform. We call it Regional Electronic Cargo Tracking, where we can see all the goods moving from Mombasa all the way to Rwanda, through Uganda, real time. And this is meant to counter diversion of transit, because if anybody declares goods to be going to Uganda and taxes are not paid and they get back to this country, what that means without payment of tax is that now there is the playing field is completely not level. They will make profits at the expense of others. It's part of trade facilitation. That is why we monitor them all the way real time. And we have vehicles, rapid response vehicles on the way. If you deviate a number of meters away from the road, we get you. And we have to find out why you are doing so. That is part of trade facilitation, to ensure that then we do not disadvantage others. Internally, we are doing a lot of fight against illicit trade. Like I said, anybody who does not pay tax disadvantages all of us who are paying taxes. So that is part of trade facilitation in ensuring that we do not have people who are not paying taxes and taking advantage of others. We, as part of trade facilitation also, internally, the payment plans we are giving is part of trade facilitation, because we know businesses are going through difficult times. So they come and negotiate. We can give you a payment. If you have $1 billion to pay and really you cannot pay it, we can allow you to pay within 6 months. That is also very useful to business. And also we have processed a lot of refunds quickly to improve the cash flow to businesses. Like I said, last year we did 26 billion, the highest ever, to be settled in 1 year, making sure then that our flower industry, our vegetable industry, floriculture, all of them that had challenges, because most of them are exported, we were able to give them back the refunds to ensure they have some level of cash flow. So the use of technology also is part of facilitation. We don't want you to use a lot of time filing and paying taxes. Your time is for generating profit. It is really for your benefit. If we make it so difficult to pay taxes and you spend a lot of time paying taxes, that is not useful for business. So we are working on our systems to ensure they are seamless. You spend as little time paying taxes as possible. Of course, our customer management framework. These days we are very engaging. You have seen, we are out there always talking to people and telling them what we do, discussing. We have been meeting trade associations, KEPSA, CAM, all of them, collating their issues, the issues of concern to them, and then we resolve them together. This is the most, I think this is the most engaging authority. This is the period we have engaged most with all our stakeholders, so that we can understand their problems, we can understand their businesses, their issues, and we resolve them as part of facilitating trade. Thank you.
Yeah, about engagement, even on social media. I mean, I think if you've had some pretty good Twitter threads, lately. So those have been very helpful in terms of just helping people understand and making, the Revenue Authority relatable. It's that, people can talk to and engage. So, I mean, I think, that's been something I've noticed. So if any of you is not following at Care, I know I'm speaking to the choir in this room, so let me speak to the audiences out there. At Care is where a lot of your issues are resolved. I want to pose this question now to, let me see, to Nigeria, Mr. Bonjubola. Oh my, this will take me a while. Please bear with me, sir. I wonder if you're still with us and if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, sir. I have a question for you, and perhaps it's a little general, but I think in the spirit of sharing of experiences, I wanted to ask this. What has been the biggest lesson learned for the federal service in Nigeria? And, what sort of mitigation principles are you putting in going forward? What's been that one thing that was a game changer for you during COVID-19 that you believe will make things very different in the medium and long term?
Thank you very much. As part of what I said in my earlier contribution, we learned a lot of lessons from the challenges brought about by COVID-19. But I think the greatest one we have learned is that we cannot continue to do things the way you used to and expect a different result. That's one big lesson we have learned. And that is why for us now, the game changer is how do we leverage on technology? How do we use technology to drive our business? How do we use technology to reach our customers? How do we use technology to reach all our stakeholders, not just the customers? To me, that is the big lesson. And that speaks to a whole lot of things. It speaks to how do we configure our offices? What kind of facilities we need to put in place in our offices? It speaks to what kind of employees we must, going forward, engage. It speaks to how now do we rearrange our current set of officers? How do we retool them? This for us are the big questions that have arisen as a result of the challenges of COVID-19. And I think this is not peculiar to Nigeria. I believe it's also what is going to be common across Africa and probably beyond. Because up to now, we have treated technology as the exclusive rights of the rich. But now events have shown to us that next to air, as air is important to the human being, oxygen as important to the human being, so now technology is important to any kind of business, including tax business. And to me, that is the big lesson. Maybe the other lesson here that for us that we have learned and which actually paid off for us is that no matter how difficult the situations may be, the right kind of engagement with stakeholders will work wonders. Because what amazes me was the kind of response that we had from our taxpayers, from our other stakeholders when we were having this very difficult time, but that we were able to engage with them and they were willing to listen to us. To me, that is another big plus. That's another big lesson. And so what that says to me is that we need to improve our corporate communication processes, how we engage with our taxpayers. If we are engaged in the right way, where we even thought that there will be no way, we'll be surprised that they will make way. So for me, the two big lessons, one is how do we do our business today? Technology is no longer for show, it is for real, and it is for real business. And secondly is how do we engage with taxpayers, with tax professionals, with people in government, with people in business? How do we engage? Thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you. And you did, in fact, mention that you're rolling out a brand new system. So that's kudos to you for that, and we wish you the best. Thank you for that. I want to ask another question that may seem, it's from one of our audience members. And I know it may be putting you on the spot, so maybe I should address this to Mr. Musinguzzi if you can still hear me. And I want to pose this to you primarily because you're the one who has met and surpassed your target by at least 1.6% of collection over the last quarter. This one will put you on the spot a little bit, so bear with me, sir. The question is, do we have reasonable tax targets in Africa vis-a-vis the targets set by government? And what is the role of revenue authorities in target setting? I know it's a tough one for you because you're at the helm of that. If Mr. Musinguzzi can hear me, what's your...
Yes, Yvonne, I can hear you. And I think it's an honest question. It's a tough one, but I think it's also a fair question. Now, of course, as you know, and I hope it's the same with the other tax jurisdictions, we do not set our own targets as revenue collectors. The target comes from our supervisors, the Ministry of Finance, and they consider a number of factors. And they come to this after some research and putting data together. Many times as tax collectors, we find the targets too high, and sometimes we complain about them not being fair or realistic. But the good thing in Uganda is that in our efforts to engage with stakeholders, Ministry of Finance being one of them, we have agreed on a cooperation where us as the revenue administrators make our input and look at the parameters they are using to set targets and discuss these. It is the new initiative going forward. We hope to have more accurate targets based on the real facts on the ground. My colleague, the Commissioner General of Kenya Revenue Authority, mentioned things like tax expenditures, which actually eat a significant percentage of the GDP. Yet these are things we need to do to encourage investment, manufacturing for us, the countries that are not yet there. So we have to engage. We can only collect so much when we're allowing also so much to go in tax incentives and so on and so forth. Yes, but if you're speaking about the specific first quarter target that we just met and surpassed, I think there are a number of reasons that can explain this. On the side of international trade, as I mentioned, the policy of government to continue allowing international goods to come in and be warehoused even when there was no capacity to pay. As the lockdown measures eased and shops started to operate, we had quite a bit of warehouse goods that were cleared, and therefore they paid taxes. We also internally were doing a number of administrative measures, some reorganization, some transfers, some tight measures. So we are really doing whatever we can to collect our revenue efficiently and also with integrity and transparency. But can we sustain this? Yes, we think we should be able to sustain this because there is enough evidence on ground to show that with the measures that we are taking, there is improvement. So we are doing things like enhancement of technology. I already explained this. Every effort we deploy in that area brings more results. When we compare the statistics and the data that we have and analyze it, it gives us more accurate findings. When we deploy digital stamps, it gives us better revenue collection. So I think we will maintain and try and collect the given targets, but we will also participate more actively in advising the policymakers, the ones that set our targets, so that these targets are set based on scientific research and evidence. And once they are based on that, then there is no reason why we can't meet them and even surpass them. I don't know, Yvonne, whether I have effectively answered your question, but those are our thoughts.
Indeed, you have, sir. Thank you for that. And I would also like to hear perhaps the experience from South Africa. I don't know if Mr. Mabetoa is still with us and whether he can hear me. I mean, certainly there's always that push and pull, I would imagine, between, the tax administrator, the tax collector, if you like, and the government that is setting targets. But perhaps now, during COVID-19, never has that been, a more stark reality. On one hand, you've got the tax incentives and the tax measures to cushion, those in the economy who are hurting during COVID-19. But the government is also keen and very ambitious to spur economic growth, which comes from the taxes that are collected. So, Mr. Nathaniel, what's the experience in South Africa when it comes to target setting from the government side, and perhaps the role, if any, you see of tax administrators with respect to this?
Thank you very much. It's a very important question and interesting one as well that we should all be grappling with as tax administrators. Particularly if you take into account that you want to make sure that you get to an optimal level of taxation that stimulates the economy and yet extracts enough out of the economy to be able to ensure that the country receives the right kind of revenue to run its activities. So it's really a very delicate balance that needs to be achieved. In South Africa, we have an arrangement where we do give inputs. It's a multi kind of approach that looks at inputs from different entities of state, if I may call them that. So we give inputs, National Treasury gives inputs, and the Reserve Bank also gives inputs. So we have a committee that sits together and really looks at different elements to this to ensure that we get to the right number. Let's take into account that we're sitting at about 25% in terms of tax to GDP. Our tax buoyancy level is above 1. So our extraction levels are looking very good. That does not mean that we do not have a big tax gap. In fact, there's quite a lot of work that's being done around that piece to make sure that we can get to the right level. We also obviously need to also take into account the elasticity as well, because you can't really put too much of a burden on the economy in terms of in terms of the tax that's being levied. So it's really a very delicate balance, but we have in South Africa an approach that ensures that all the parties can come together and give their inputs. Of course, National Treasury would, on the basis of a number of other factors, make the final decision, but we do give inputs into that process. And also we have an opportunity at mid-term for the minister to revise up or revise down, depending on what the outcomes are. So it does not necessarily mean that once the target is set for the year, we do not have the flexibility to take into account the changes that may have happened in the economy that may necessitate a change in the target setting. So we're quite comfortable with the approach that's being taken. I just want to take the opportunity maybe to address one or two things that or questions that you raised earlier. The first one around the key lessons that we have learned. And without repeating what has been said already, I think for South Africa, there are 3 key lessons that I think we have learned. The first one is one around big data and more use of big data. I think that's absolutely critical because it allows us to tap into this well of rich data that exists in the country that allows us to improve our ability and our efficiencies, as Commissioner Boro has mentioned, of collecting taxes. That is an area that I think tax administrations throughout the world need to tap into. If you consider that there are about, there's quite a lot that's being added to big data on a daily basis. I've been told that it's something to the order of 1 quintillion data items that are added onto the big data space every day. A quintillion, I've been told, is 1 with 18 zeros. Data items that are being added every day. So we can't afford not to tap into that well. We can't afford not to create the connections and the synergies in terms of data, the transactions that are happening, and so on. And that speaks to how we manage the revenue collection and understanding that the different transactions that are happening. It enables us to discharge our mandate. And I think that's the first key lesson that we've learned, that we need to really tap into big data and become a serious player. That's why we're pushing towards getting more data scientists on board to also touch on what know it. As I said, between 19 and 22%. And it's a